Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about the 1976 film Lifeguard, which is a seldom discussed movie that reveals the unpleasant truth about romantic relationships that most men refuse to face. Alright, so let's get into it. Lifeguard is a great example of a cinematic diamond in the rough. If you ran across this movie on some streaming service, you'd probably think it was like a 70s version of Hard Bodies or some other tacky beach comedy. But when you watch Lifeguard, you realize that though this is not exactly art cinema, this is a serious film. There's a clear mismatch between how the film presents itself and what it actually is. Okay, the main character is an LA County lifeguard named Rick, played by Sam Elliott. And our first impression of Rick is that he's like the lifeguard version of the Marlboro Man. He looks like a seasoned veteran in life, but he's in his 30s, he's unattached, he drives a Corvette convertible, and he pretty much does whatever he wants. As we get to know Rick, we realize that he has some depth to his character. He's not just some guy who doesn't want to settle down because he's a partier or because he lacks maturity or ambition. He's actually a thoughtful and reflective man who is serious about his work. Rick likes being a lifeguard, and he's good at it. But being a lifeguard is more than just a job to him. It's a way of life and maybe even part of his identity. As the film progresses, however, we get subtle and not so subtle hints that some of the people in his life, his parents and his friends, are judging him negatively for still doing this kind of work in his 30s. And though we know that Rick's doing basically what he wants to do in life, we can see that these hints of society's disapproval are starting to bother him. So as it happens, he runs into an old friend who presents him with a job opportunity that could bring with it a lot more money. And this job would certainly increase Rick's status also. His friend also mentions that their 15-year high school reunion is coming up and that his old high school girlfriend might be there. So Rick decides to go. At the reunion, Rick eventually meets his old flame, Kathy, and it's obvious that she's been on his mind for the last 15 years. Kathy, played by Ann Archer, is a very attractive single mother who runs an art gallery. And Ann Archer is absolutely perfect in this role. She just oozes understated beauty in a tasteful hoity-toityness that's hard to describe, but when you see it, you'll know exactly what I mean. So Rick and Kathy rekindle their old relationship, and we see Rick spending time in Kathy's elegantly understated living room. Then we see Rick playing with Kathy's young son, teaching him things, and this is followed by slow, languorous, candlelit lovemaking. It's all very pleasant and nice and just feels right. However, and now we're getting into the central theme of this film, Kathy wastes no time in asking Rick, "So what's next for you?" Which is, of course, code for, "Your status as a lifeguard is too low for me. So what are you going to do to fix that?" This is what's fascinating about Lifeguard. It tackles head-on one of the most fundamental choices that men make when they decide what to do with their lives. And this choice is not often explored in such a direct way as it is in this film. The drive for status and the drive to pursue women are so fundamental to male psychology that they're hard to tease apart. And indeed, in this film, we see them become intertwined and manifest themselves as a single object of desire, and that is this woman, Kathy. Rick is contemplating taking this new job that will raise his status, and he knows that this will also cement his relationship with his new girlfriend. In fact, we suspect that Kathy is the primary reason he's considering taking this new job, so now the terms of this proposition are clear. From Rick's perspective, if I take this new job, I'll get more respect from people and I can have this trophy girlfriend, along with a cute story about how we rekindled our high school romance, and I'll have this comfortable middle-class life that society recognizes as success. But here's the problem. I don't really want this job, and the guy I would work for is a douchebag, and the customers I would interact with in this new job will be douchebags. And based on what I've seen so far, my new girlfriend's friends are probably also the kinds of people that I can't stand. And on top of this, if I accept this arrangement, I completely concede the frame of my life to her. In other words, instead of living in my own world, being the captain of my own ship, I'll be a passenger on her ship. Well, would most men accept this deal? We don't have to wonder. We can just observe the people in our lives. And that is where most men in our culture end up sooner or later. Of course, all romantic relationships are transactional on some level. When you pare away all of the emotional baggage surrounding romantic attachment, there's usually a pretty straightforward exchange occurring. Most often, sex for resources of some kind, and the resources could be in the form of money, status, financial security, replacement of a missing parent, whatever. The problem is not that romantic relationships are fundamentally transactional, but that most people, and I'm referring mostly to men in our culture here, most men either believe or act as if they believe that relationships like marriage aren't transactions. In other words, they seem to believe that the other person wants them around primarily because of who they are as a person and not due to what they bring to the table. The vast majority of humans who have ever lived never had the luxury of worrying about things like this. But for us living in the modern world, the question is, does it make sense to build a life together, meaning make a promise of sexual exclusivity, buy a house together, start a family together, etc., with a person who is mainly interested in us, whether they admit it or not, for practical reasons? Does it make sense to treat romantic relationships as some kind of spiritual union of souls, when in reality the relationship is much closer to an at-will employment arrangement? That is, either party can, and eventually will, effectively terminate this unspoken contract when it stops benefiting them. Well, whether it makes sense or not, that is in fact what most men do. However, our protagonist Rick is definitely not most men. He is acutely aware of the terms of this contract. Rick doesn't want to play the game that society has prepared for him. He wants to live honestly and play his own game. Rick has a number of encounters with women in this film, and one of them I have to mention is with Wendy, played by a young and extremely cute Kathleen Quinlan. Wendy's a teenager in this movie. She's a senior in high school, and she has a wonderful, sweet, natural quirkiness to her, and she serves as kind of a reminder of how a lot of teenage girls acted back then before they were jaded by years of competing for validation on social media. Lifeguard is like a perfect time capsule from the 1970s United States in so many ways. It's gloriously politically incorrect by today's standards, of course, but it reveals many other cultural shifts. Life just seemed to chug along at a slower pace back then, and the people, the men and the women, had a natural look to them that you don't see much today. Not everybody had perfect, mechanically aligned teeth, and their bodies were closer to what you'd see out on the prehistoric savannah, compared to today, where many Americans appear to be either hyper fit or metabolically diseased. Flight attendants were stewardesses, and it was taken for granted that they were good looking. Another obvious cultural change is evident in a scene at Kathy's house, where Kathy's young son interrupts a conversation in the kitchen between her and Rick. And Kathy responds to her son by making him go away and stop bothering them. And I thought, whoa, when was the last time you saw that happen? The default assumption with American parents today is that the child is the most important member of the household, and all adult conversations are subject to cancellation by the child at any time. As a film, Lifeguard is just a pleasure to watch. It has a slow, almost hypnotic pace with lots of nice schmaltzy musical interludes, and the waves crashing on the beach serve as a constant meditative refrain throughout. You really get a sense of the cyclical nature of this beach and of the cycles or seasons of life. You feel what it would be like to just sit out there and observe people from this lifeguard's tower. So that's it for Lifeguard. Check this film out and let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I'm Rod Richards. See you next time. Cheers.